Welcome to a football show, of course. Thursday edition. Going to take a look at the Titans defense. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, and it is great to be here. Zach, how are you, sir? Good to see you, bud.
Doing good. Ready to talk about this Jamal Adams signing.
That is correct. Big news on that side of the ball. Okay, Kingston Group, Sinkers Beverages. Kingston Group, I just want to say thank you for all of your support over the years. Kingston Group, amazing local company here in Nashville, taking care of you, the Nashville home buyers, and the Nashville business owners, taking care of you guys. Just fantastic group of people. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Sinkers Beverages, also a fantastic group of people. Good swag as well. Got the hat on today. So make sure you go check that out and join the In Club if you are in the East Nashville area and you shop at Sinkers, or you use Uber Eats and search Sinkers Beverages and have them deliver the booze directly to your house, Zach.
They drive so you can drink.
There you have it. And if you're in the Hendersonville area, make sure you check out Bluegrass Beverages, proud sponsor, of course, of football and other F words. And you can go join their customer rewards program as well. It's called the BOB, the Best of Bluegrass. Both In Crowd and BOB offer you a lot of first choice allocations. I got the allocation email this week about like what I get to go pick out because I'm in the In Crowd. Fantastic bourbon selection. They're always taking care of their customers. Great selection of other stuff as well. And they got events, all kinds of fun stuff coming up this summer over the course of the summer months. So make sure you check out Sinkers and Bluegrass. There you go. So I guess, yeah, we'll start right there. Zach, what was your reaction to the news?
I was perplexed. I think that's the best way to put it, because obviously it's a one-year deal. It's not that expensive. But his fit on this defense, there's just doesn't feel like there's a place for his brand of football, of what he is heading into 2024. And I'm just very confused as to why, out of all the safeties on the market, I'm assuming he's just the cheapest and maybe the most willing to also come play for the Tennessee Titans. I mean, there is a history with Denard Wilson, obviously, but that was also like several seasons ago. That's such a long time ago. And it's been a long time since he's been an above average safety in the NFL. And there's a lot to hammer him on, but to me, it just doesn't seem like a good fit. And he's obviously a role-playing safety. He's not a starter. And he comes in and he is a role player on this team. And that role is severely limited and kind of hurts the Tennessee Titans defense when you put him on the field.
When you put it that way, Zach. So I'll admit a couple of things here. First of all, I thought he was, based on how folks talk about him and the amount of time I have had Jamal Adams like in my brain just as a person around football, I thought he was like 33 years old. He is only 28 years old. So there is that, if you're taking the other side of, well, maybe he develops this or becomes that, or I'm not saying that's what I think. The way people talk about him, the way you just talked about him, the way
he's got 7 seasons under his belt, right? So like it's an old 29, because he's about to be 29. He's an old 29, especially with the injuries that has plagued him these last few years.
And part of that is my personal, like I met him on a camp tour when I was working for Sirius XM. We would go to these different schools in the summertime around this time, and we'd go do like a whole day of taping. We'd watch practice and we'd like tape a bunch of interviews. So we'd go to LSU and we'd talk to Les Miles and Coach Orgeron. And, at the time, I want to say it was Jamal Adams, who was young at the time. I want to say he was like a freshman, maybe. Devin White, I think, was on the team at that time. Something like that around that time. Baker Mayfield was at Oklahoma. We would fly then to Norman and do a whole thing at Norman. Lincoln Riley wasn't even the coach yet. Who's now like at USC. And we flew down to Texas. Charlie Strong was the coach at Texas at the time. So like this is a while ago, but I met him, and he's such a captivating individual, and just from a personality standpoint, and he had such a bright future ahead of him. High level draft pick, high All-American. Like it feels like he has been around forever in my brain. And but that is conflicting with the fact that I have such high opinions of him as a safety at his prime. That's just not where we are right now. And so I think it's if you're asking me, like, what do I think of the move? It's depth. It's a body. It's not the name you think it is, but he's younger than you think he is, but he's played more than you think he has. So
yeah,
I from a scheme standpoint, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know where he fits in or what he lines up as, but
that's the thing, right? I mean, he's not better than Molden. I mean, I think at a time that he was, but he's not better than Molden. And if you put him on the field, who are you taking off, right? Because they're not going to use a lot of dime packages, right? So this is something that everybody has kind of said. This has been the thing that a lot of people have tried to skew in a positive light in favor of Jamal Adams, is that they're going to use, they'll be an aggressive dime package team, and that's when he'll come out on the field. Okay, well, Baltimore last year only used dime 1% of the time. Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles, who has been the guy that has been constantly brought up about his biggest influences have been Todd and Greg. You rarely hear anything about the impact the Ravens had on his influences. Tampa Bay, because Greg Williams is not in the league anymore, 5% usage, which ranks 20th. So you're not going to see him on the field a lot.
Right.
If he's not going to beat out Molden, and he shouldn't beat out Molden. And if he does, you got a real big issue in the middle of this field. When you look at Kenneth Murray and Jamal Adams and Jack Gibbons are all the same. They all have the same characteristics. And that one big characteristic that they all share is the fact that they can't cover. and that's not good to have in passing situations. So,
yep, I agree with that.
If Adams is on the field, who are you taking off?
Maybe he's
defense better, and maybe that's Gibbons.
I was going to say maybe he's better than some of these linebackers, and that's the only thing that they're thinking.
Right. So let me ask you this: okay, you put Kenneth Murray and Jamal Adams out there, and take Gibbons off. Okay.
Feels so
what
weird.
does that say about Cedric Gray?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you're not putting Cedric Gray out there for that, so you're taking snaps away from a guy that's supposed to be your next linebacker. So you got them two. So are you blitzing Kenneth Murray, who we know can't cover, and Jamal Adams out of the middle of the field? So you're putting Elijah Molden and Roger McCreary to cover the middle of the field while Monty Hooker's deep. Doesn't seem like a really smart way to deploy a defense, I guess. But it's also not realistic because they're not going to use a lot of dime packages. So that's why it's perplexing.
Perplexing is a good word.
And for those that say like his blitzing is a big plus, well, yeah, that was true back in 2020, where he got, I think it was like 10 and a half, or he had the most sacks the safety's ever had in a season.
Yep.
Okay. He hasn't had a sack since 2020. So, what are we even doing here? That's to me is I think I'm more annoyed by the reaction, the positive spin people are trying to put on this, when really it's a big nothing burger for me. Like, when we talk about the defensive depth, this is a big nothing burger, and it feels like a big waste of everybody's time when there's other guys. You have the cap space when there's other guys, like even Eddie Jackson is a better alternative than Jamal Adams.
Glorified James Williams says, Kale, you've got Jason saying nothing but a box safety, and Kenneth saying, of all the moves the Titans have made, I really don't like this one. Huge character problems. Now, I will say there were definitely not good headlines coming out of Seattle. we'll just leave it at that.
The most hated player in Seattle history is one of the first videos that will come up when you Google Jamal Adams. Yeah, and there are two articles saying that they're trying to kick him off the team. Like, let's get this guy off the team. He's a liability. And he is. He can't cover. You're talking about a guy that allowed 82.4% reception percentage last year. I mean, that's not good. Like, it's a
what if he's been brought in to help?
Perplexing.
What if he's been brought in to help increase Will Levis's completion percentage in practice?
It will be in practice. Yeah. I mean, that'd be great. Maybe we could trade him to maybe he could float around to other teams in the AFC South, or,
I'll be honest with myself, which is I would be disingenuous if on this exact episode, part of the main thing we're going to talk about is going to be depth at linebacker and safety. Yeah. And if one of the main things we're going to talk about today on the show that I am most interested in from a camp perspective, and I can't wait to see what happens with X and Y, two of the top things on the list that I've written down for today's conversation are depth at linebacker and safety. And if you're going to bring in a piece who has experience, who for not too much money can give you maybe some depth at linebacker and safety, I can't scream that it's like the dumbest thing from like a logic standpoint. And I do trust Denard Wilson to have sign off on some of this part of this decision. So if Denard Wilson says, no, this guy is of value to me and what I want to do, and I need some depth at linebacker and safety, it may not work, and I'm fine being critical of it. But at the end of the day, it's hard for me then to spend the next 20 minutes bitching about depth at linebacker and safety. And I know that
I don't think this really improves that, though. Like that's
I know.
that's my counter argument to this is that it improves it by a very, very thin margin. Like we're talking the thinnest of thin margins. It is an improvement over a guy like Mike Brown or Matt Jackson at safety. It is an improvement over Luke Gifford. Like I don't think it's an improvement over Jack Gibby. Like that's where I'm at with Jamal Adams. Like I don't think that he's necessarily brings anything better than Jack Gibby. He is just Jack Gibby. He is just Kenneth Murray. He is just if you even put him at linebacker, right? He is just a clone of what you've already got, which is nobody that can cover anybody. Like, where is the coverage linebacker? Even if he's not a safety, right? Like, because that's the thing. Then why'd you draft Cedric Gray?
I was going to say, isn't Cedric Gray supposed to be
but how's he going to see the field if Jamal it's.
I don't think so. Here's what I would say.
That's why it's perplexing for me, is because it just doesn't fit.
So here's what I would say. So this is just like me going like galaxy brain to sort of answer the question that you're asking that maybe doesn't have an answer. But I don't see him as a starting linebacker ahead of Cedric Gray, for example. But is he your third linebacker ahead of James Williams? Is he I don't see him starting over Hooker or Molden.
But Cedric Gray's your third linebacker.
Maybe. I mean, I would maybe.
That's what's trending, right? It's trending that way. Unfortunately,
we're going to discuss that because that's probably
so sad.
It's the second biggest question I think on the defense potentially. So, I just think that if you're saying we brought in a player who's got a lot of experience, who can be versatile in his here's the other thing: is he willing to be let's put the middle linebackers and the safeties in one list, right? Make one list of them, right? Of who should be on the field, who's good enough, et cetera, et cetera. If you're making a list of him, he's not in the top 4, but he's probably not in the bottom 4. So if you're telling me he's like the 4th linebacker or the 3rd linebacker and the 3rd safety, but he can play both, and that's one position, and he's willing to do it, and he's willing to be on special teams. Again, I'm not agreeing with this. I'm just trying to let's talk through the logic of this. And again, Denard Wilson said
if he may get cut, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know what the contract really looks like other than it's a 1-year deal. I'm sure it's very, very low, or else why would you sign him over spending money on better players, right? Like,
I agree.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a weird move that doesn't make sense, and it's really less about the player, but more about the fit, right? Like it's more about the fit on this team, because of who you have to take off to put him on. And then he is a liability because he's not a good blitzer anymore. He's not good in coverage. I guess he's good against the run, and maybe that's their plan, is that Jamal Adams will play first and second down, and then he'll come off the field for Elijah Molden. I still don't like that. Like, you know what I'm saying?
So it's funny. What if the plan is to sign a player that you don't want to play? What if that's the plan?
and like people are like, well, he played his best ball under Denard Wilson. Okay, that was a long time ago. I mean, it doesn't feel like a long, but that is long in NFL years. And Denard Wilson is now defensive coordinator. He's not spending a lot of time getting to, he can't take special projects. So like the responsibilities and the time and where you can put your focus on certain players for a defensive coordinator is a lot different than when you're a defensive backs coach, when you're a safeties coach or a position coach. So his focus can't be, well, I have to handhold and take this special project in Jamal Adams and get him back up to speed and get him back to the days when he was 24, at his best time. Like,
all right, let me ask you.
We have to kind of understand that, yes, he's about to turn 29, but he has played only 10 games the last 2 seasons. And how often do we see a guy that gets older, suffers from injuries, get better?
Well, let me
reclaim form, I guess I should say.
So let's like reverse engineer the strategy then. Let's come at it from another direction. Forget about hand holding or spending time developing him or whatever. Just like, what is the one thing that he does best in your opinion?
I
like roll down into the box against the run.
Nothing. I mean, nothing.
No. Like
great. I mean, I don't
What?
think he's very good at anything.
Okay.
I mean, I'll be completely honest. I guess his best quality, okay, would be, I guess, his experience.
Okay.
His best attribute on the field would be maybe blitzing, but I mean, that's not it anymore. So, like, that's the thing. He's like I'm saying is that he hasn't been good at blitzing in about 3 years. He hasn't been good at coverage really almost really ever. There's been ups and downs and stuff like that. And his run defense is probably all right.
So here's my question. Well, again, this is me trying to work through the strategy here. This is
I
not
know. I'm just answering you
yeah.
honestly. I just
I
can't lie.
so and I think if you're going to reverse engineer this, it is all right. I'm adding depth, I'm adding experience, and I've got a player that does this very particular thing that we know he can do X, Y, or Z, and we maybe don't feel like we've got an in the box safety for goal line packages on running downs. Maybe they don't feel like they've got 3rd and 1, an in the box safety that they like to trust to roll down into the box to play a big physical game against a team that's clearly going to run the football in a particular situation. And then you package it with experience and you add experience to the resume and you go, this is what we're buying for probably a very little risk here, very low risk contract to say, look, we're buying somebody that I know, we're buying somebody with experience, and we're buying somebody that can do this thing, which maybe is what they think they're missing at linebacker, which I would agree with, which is enough power and strength at the line of scrimmage and the point of attack behind Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. So if that's, I'm not agreeing with it or saying it's going to work.
It just seems like such a niche to try and fill when safety is a bigger issue than just what you can do at the goal line with the safety.
I don't disagree.
And the same with linebacker too. But linebacker, this doesn't really, I don't think, really fix the linebacker issue.
No,
but it does fix. It does. I get what you're saying. I just think that there is a better approaches to doing that and getting more out of a player than just, okay, well, we need some strength, some run stopping ability, because the run doesn't matter, but we need some run stopping ability. And this guy knows our thing. Like, it's just such a small niche that I feel like that's why it's still perplexing to me. Like, I understand what you're saying, and I do agree. That's likely his role, right? He's a run stopping safety. I mean, he still had last year a very high stop percentage. I mean, out of, it looks like a 6%, which is probably around close to top 10, maybe just outside of the top 10. So that's good.
See,
but
we got there.
Yeah, but I mean,
took us 19 minutes.
At the end of the day, it's just like filling a niche that small when you could have got Justin Simmons, which could provide you more, or go get Carl Lawson, which, listen, this contract will likely not prevent them from signing still Justin Simmons or Eddie Jackson or another safety. They still need to sign another safety. The safety depth is still bad. They still need a pass rusher on the outside. It just feels like such a weird strategy to go. You know,
it also reeks of an NFL thing to do. Like, and I'm not suggesting that this is why they did it, but a name that gets attention with a coach that you know is like the most NFL in the club kind of thing that happens, right? It happens with coaching staffs all the time. You hire a coach because you know him. You know, like it doesn't mean he's the best option, but you know him. And it's just I'm not saying that's what Denard Wilson advocated for. I'm not saying that's why he wanted him. He probably has his own reasons, I would assume. And as we transition into what I think will be the most exciting and interesting storyline in all of the defensive training camp, it is, to me, it's centered around Denard Wilson and how he defines his defense and what he wants to do and how he puts his stamp on it and how he takes over and how he controls it and how much space Brian Callahan is going to give him on the practice field to actually do all of that, which I think will be great. I don't think I've seen him. I mean, I can't remember a time Brian Callahan wasn't talking to the offense during any of the times I've been out there. So he has kind of what feels like complete control. And I think, you know, if Denard Wilson says X about Jamal Adams, we got to take that for what it's worth for now. And he hasn't done anything to disprove our trust in his ability to do the job, Denard Wilson at least. So he is by far the most interesting storyline for me. On the field, there's way more interesting, juicy things to talk about from a defensive standpoint. But one of the things I'm most looking forward to is just how does he manage and run that half of the team? And what does it look like in training camp? And schematically, I'm just interested. I'm interested in Denard Wilson as a storyline in camp, much like Brian Callahan's play calling is a top priority on offense.
Yep. It's an interesting defense because we really don't know, kind of like what we talked about with Brian Callahan. We really don't know what to expect from Denard Wilson's defense. Probably even, I mean, we probably know that there is going to be a lot of heavy blitzing. They're not going to be sending 4-man rushes like the Tennessee Titans have been known to do under Vrabel. They're going to be being a little bit more exotic with their rushes. They're going to play a lot of man press coverage. We know it's going to be wildly different than the defenses that we've seen.
Yep.
Even probably dating back to Dick LeBeau. Like it'd be Greg Williams and Jim Schwartz would probably be the closest defenses that we've seen to what you're going to see now. But we don't know really what that means. Like we know it means certain things. We know it means press coverage. We know it means blitzing, but we don't know how much nickel are they going to play, because Todd down at Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles, he only did 58% or 59% nickel, which is really low because Baltimore did it 80% of the time. The Titans were in the 70s. The Bengals were in the 70s. So we may not see a lot of nickel now, and that's kind of crazy to me when you think about how the state of the.
Hang on, I just want to clarify something. You said Baltimore was in nickel 80% of the time?
80% of the time.
Why would we not see a high level of nickel with Denard Wilson?
Because how often has he talked about Baltimore?
That's true. Okay. All right. I'm just curious.
It's almost weird how little he's talked about Baltimore. Whenever he's asked about his influences, it's been Greg and Todd. And we haven't heard anything about Mike. And I'm using first names because they all sound like old white men. And
Williams, Bowles, and McDonald.
Yeah. So, like, at the end of the day, I mean, you have to look at both Tampa Bay's influences just as heavy. If you have to weight the Tampa Bay influence, the Todd Bowles influence, more than you weight the Ravens influence, based on what he said. Now, that could totally change. And I do think they'll play a lot of nickel because look at the corners that they got.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it'll be 80% of the time.
So 70% of the time. So here's Section 240 says, don't laugh. But did they see Adams?
I'm already laughing because this is ridiculous. Did anybody watch Kyle Hamilton
play? Let me finish, dude. Let me read the comment first, Zach, before you shit all over it. But do they see Adams or Williams in this Ravens Kyle Hamilton scheme? So first of all, Jamal Adams is not anywhere close to the same body type or skill set of Kyle Hamilton. Do they see him rolling up into the box maybe and playing against the run? That seems like his best attribute currently. So sure, maybe. James Williams actually is built like a Kyle Hamilton from a size standpoint, but is not even close to the player. That doesn't have any of the same sort of attributes. So I think Kyle Hamilton is what I think people wanted Isaiah Simmons to be coming out of Clemson. He played middle linebacker for Clemson. You think he was drafted by the Cardinals, and they thought he was positionless football guy, like that he's the future. This 6'4", 235 pounds hybrid safety linebacker, that is the future of positionless football that counters a bunch of McCaffreys and Deebo Samuels and Kyle Juszczyks and George Kittles. And Isaiah Simmons never really worked out. He didn't pan out. He didn't become the player. I think Kyle Hamilton is, again, the kind of player that is trying to be this positionless football. But Kyle Hamilton is a special talent from college ranks.
The only positionless football that Jamal Adams can play is that he's not very good at any of the positions.
He has no position. He has no position. All right. Okay.
But like, here's the thing: is like, I have to ask because there's a guy that that also I've seen a few people say this, not just Section 240, but there is also a guy that is a fantasy football guy. I think Marcus Whitman. Have you ever heard of Marcus Whitman at TFG Football? Got 100K on YouTube subscribers and stuff. He's an NFL draft analyst. But he said, considering I just tweeted 2 days ago that I think Adams can still play, I'm super intrigued to see him in a Ravens-inspired system in the Kyle Hamilton role in Tennessee. And I'm like, Amani Hooker would be the closest guy on this team that's a safety that is in the Kyle Hamilton role. But there is no talent like Kyle Hamilton on this team. which you are correct. But even if you were to have a guy that is going to play positionless football, it would be Amani Hooker. It wouldn't be 29-year-old injury prone, slow as shit Jamal Adams. Like it's like you have like to me that's like that's a tweet. That tweet right there makes me feel like that is someone that just turned on Twitter today, has never watched football, and it decided to tweet. And he's not that guy. Like I can,
Yeah.
but that is a you don't know ball tweet. Like in a nutshell.
If you're asking who has, and again, Kyle Hamilton is one of one, so nobody has one of him. But if you're asking who is built physically in the mold of a Kyle Hamilton, I agree. Amani Hooker is the most capable of doing it, but James Williams is the one that is built the most like Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
And again, they just don't
like if you put Amani Hooker's like football talent in,
yeah.
in James Williams, then you would have Kyle Hamilton.
Experienced wisdom, talent, and experience and instincts of Amani Hooker in James Williams' body, and you still only get to like Kyle Hamilton light. Like you still don't even get to Kyle Hamilton. You're just Kyle Hamilton light. So
can we also talk about just real quick?
Yeah.
How quick the Tennessee Titans turned all of this around. So it got announced this morning, right, by Teron Davenport first, and then it was then the national guys got it right, and then they immediately official team account immediately announces the signing, which is very rare. That usually takes a couple of days, and then an hour after that, he's on. They're promoting his appearance on the OTP. And they just now put out a video while we were doing this of him signing his contract, all in a span of a few hours since it got announced this morning. This is something that has been in the works, for this team, and nobody in the local media or national media has caught a whiff of it.
Well, so it's not wild if you know the time of the year, which is that the players the media is not around, is not allowed to be at the facility. So he could have gotten in there on Saturday. They could have spent a few days negotiating, and no one would have ever known other than the people that knew, because you're not around it. And even the national folks are off this week and last week. Last week is the slowest week of just sports in general. This week is pretty slow as well. So I'm not surprised that they had nothing to do and got all of their ducks lined up quickly. Because what do you have to do is you have to get a production staff, you have to get Mike Keith, you got to get Jim Wyatt, you got to get get all of them lined up. And because everyone's not doing a lot right now, it's easy to get them all lined up, if that makes sense. It just as a
well, you would think that would be the case in the season, right? Ridley, it took a couple of days for them to announce all the official stuff and get all their ducks in a row for Ridley. It was announced out of nowhere.
It was leaked,
right?
Yeah.
It was leaked out of nowhere, but you would think there would be, you would think his agent would have leaked it, right? Or someone inside that building would have leaked it. It really stands to reason more. It's not really a knock on national media. And I wasn't trying to, I typically do shit on local and national media a lot, but that was not what I was trying to convey. I was trying to convey that it was a tight-lipped ship, and they got all this stuff done in the span of however long without anybody knowing. And I think that's very impressive. And that does tie into Calvin Ridley, which it was just out of nowhere, boom, Calvin Ridley. Tennessee Titans are in on Calvin Ridley, right?
Yeah.
So
now
it's more of a note about them inside that building than it is about the media.
No, I agree. I just think it's ultimately, and this point's not really that important, but ultimately I think didn't Ridley leak? And then a couple of days go by before they do the official announcement tweet and the official announcement post.
That's how it always is, though. So, they always wait. It gets announced by someone in national media and free agency. Then a couple of days later, something gets signed.
But why? What I'm saying is, why is that the media, national and local, is working the phones in that period of time to get that scoop? No one's working the phones right now. There's just not, and they're not trying that hard because nothing that happens right now is really that important. and ultimately, that's the end of the conversation here, which is, okay, nice, fine. Let's see what you do with it. Not gonna be a huge story on the team, I don't think. But we'll see. Maybe Denard Wilson knows something that we don't. All right. So Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Make sure you search Uber Eats on Sinkers. Find Sinkers Beverages. Search Have the booze delivered directly to your house this weekend if you're partying, Zach.
They drive so you can drink.
Yep, there you go. BuildKG.com is the website for the Kingston Group. Our great and amazing friends over at the Kingston Group, Nashville's custom home and remodeling firm. Make sure you check out the Kingston Group. Remember the name, Build KG. If you're buying a house, selling a house, remodeling a house, renovating a house, anything that you're doing, before you do it, talk to them. Kingston Group, BuildKG.com. Okay, defensive camp storylines. Already kind of talked about Denard Wilson. To me, the number one, and I'm just going to go first here, the thing I am most interested by, and sometimes what we get interested by is not always the most important thing. Sometimes our brains just gravitate towards a thing. And the thing I am most interested in, and you can tell me this is unfair, and I'm okay with that, is T'Vondre Sweat's availability. That is like the most interesting thing for me, is how many times is he on the practice field out there doing the job? That is what I care about.
And I think that's fair if you keep it within a certain boundary of like realism. Like you're not on Twitter knocking T'Vondre Sweat every chance you get. You're not even like, there are people that turned the Jamal Adams signing back onto T'Vondre Sweat. Like there's a difference between, you know what I'm saying? There's a difference between acknowledging that this is the biggest storyline on this defense, which is what we talked about in Football and Other Efforts. We acknowledge that this is the biggest storyline on this defense is T'Vondre Sweat. And that is because of what happened in the offseason and the rumors and rumblings that have been around that we have all talked about ad nauseum at this point. There is no new information unless a new police report or something comes out, knock on wood. There is no new information to be gained by keep rehashing the same thing over and over and keep knocking a kid down that hasn't played a football. But you're right. He has to play football, and part of playing football is being out on the practice field. It's being available. Now, he wasn't available because of some kind of lower body injury, right? We don't know the extent of it. They're not telling us. That may be the most frustrating thing about this regime, is that we're probably going to get just as little information from them about injuries, if maybe not even a little bit less than what we got from Mike Vrabel with the way that Callahan talked about injury reports. So we'll see. But we don't know. We just know it's a lower body injury. And we don't know how much was just cautionary stuff either. Like, okay, it's not that bad of an injury. Let's be cautionary. Let's use this time to focus on something different. But that time has passed. And I think Stoney brought up a good point yesterday, is that if he shows up at 366, I don't think anybody really cares. If he shows up at 376, then you have an issue, right? If he in between this time, if in between all that. Now, if he just stays the same, that's fine. If he loses weight, that's a whole different positive issue to promote. But at the end of the day, we don't know what this kid is going to be. And there's a difference between being worried about how he plays at that weight. It's more about the what showing up at a certain weight says about his taking serious of the off-season time. Because it's really easy to gain weight and not work out when you're on your own. Yeah. So it says a lot about the person that you are.
So I think it's funny. Like I almost don't want to get caught up in like watching the weight.
Will you guys even know besides just
I don't think so. I don't think
on your eyes?
It'll be an eyeball test of like, and what happens is, and this has happened with, I've talked to people for the team, inside the team, and other media, where you just kind of, you think you see something and you go to somebody and you go, am I seeing this right? And you sort of maybe ask like two different people, one on the media and one on the team. And if they kind of both give you the same answer, you can kind of go, yeah, I trust my eyes then. So-and-so's a little bit different. So-and-so's a little bit smaller. So-and-so's a little bit bigger. So, you can kind of just say, you
guys didn't get a lot of exposure to T'Vondre Sweat to probably make that assumption, really.
I think it was
once.
I think it was the first day of minicamp. We went out there and he did a bunch of drills. I got a bunch of video of him and he looked the part. He's a large guy. But like, honestly, what matters, like, that's why I sort of stick with, to me, it's about the availability. Like, if you come in a little heavy, I almost don't care as much, because if you are available in camp every day that you're supposed to be, or that is within reasonable expectation, for a defensive tackle in general, then I kind of think it's good. It works itself out. Like, if he's underweight by a few pounds, and sure, that's great.
It's hard
but like
to maintain weight is what people need to understand. It's hard to maintain a certain weight. You usually lose it. Look at Peter Skoronski, how he never got back in season, never got back to the weight he was before the appendectomy. So to me,
it's difficult. The only thing that officially, truly makes T'Vondre Sweat a better football player for the Tennessee Titans is for him to be on the practice field with Jeffrey Simmons. Full stop. And so I don't care, honestly. I mean, it's a story. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I don't personally care if he comes in 10 pounds heavy, 10 pounds light, right at 366. I don't care as much about that. If he can show the team and the media and the coaching staff that he is available and able to work all through camp, I'm not saying every single rep or every single practice. I'm just saying like within a normal.
Because we also don't know what their plan is going to be for T'Vondre Sweat. It may not be that he's out there every practice, and that's how they set up the plan.
That's true, but that also then that I'm starting to have PTSD of like muscle management with Vrabel and stuff that I don't. And I hear you.
But, I mean, there's also Jeffrey Simmons was not out there all the time at camp, so like there are the players just sometimes don't show up at camp because they have something they need to do on the inside.
Sure, as a rookie who has all of this stuff around him, be it fair or unfair, the thing that he can do the best that will make him the best player for the Titans is to be on the field. And that is, it doesn't matter if it's maintenance. It doesn't matter if it's they have to take it easy on him. It doesn't matter if it's his fault and he's out of shape. None of that, like not being available is going to hurt him and his development the most. And so for whatever reason, if I'm out there 15 times, I want to know how many times T'Vondre Sweat should be expected to be out there and how many times was he not. And that's kind of it. Like, it's not because I think he's going to be a good player or a bad player. It's not because not being available is going to ruin his career. Like, I'm not jumping to some stupid Twitter conclusion here. But at the end of the day, the way he will be his best version of himself for this team is to be available to practice as much as he can. And I don't think it's more complicated than that, honestly. But that's
I'm with you in the sense that he does have to be out there. And because first off, that just also gives more credence to the people that are being negative and who have been harping on this all off season anyway. But at the end of the day, if he's not out there because of their plan, because each player has their own specific offseason practice plan, I'm okay with. If he's not out there because he's still injured, or if he's out of shape, or because he got in trouble, then we got some issues. They'll excuse. I don't like to say excused absences, but something that's part of the Tennessee Titans plan, I can understand. Right. But you want him to be out there, 95% of the time, right? You want him to get all these experiences. You want him to be able to play in preseason games. You want him to get the pads on and go up against these two teams in joint practices. He needs that. It's hard to be able to be a second-round pick and a guy in his situation with his baggage that is coming in, whether he's owned up to it or not. He has baggage. He has weight concerns. He has maturity concerns. Now, the Tennessee Titans have done their due diligence and feel very comfortable. Like, they felt comfortable with Jeffrey Simmons. They felt very comfortable and with, T'Vondre Sweat. So it's now about him taking the path of what Jeffrey Simmons did, showing up to practices, being in shape, being at the best version of yourself. And when your number is called and when you step out into that field, you're the best version of yourself.
Bingo.
And if he does not get to that point, it's kind of like gelling with the offensive line. You want your offensive line, the starting five, to be out at practice, getting as many reps as possible together without people going in and out of the lineup. You need that. And Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat are a big part of covering up some of the deficiencies on this defense. And listen,
it's the plan.
We talked about it yesterday.
It is the plan. The plan is for Simmons and Sweat to take up all of the space and bodies.
Yes.
That is what
you're talking about two guys who, let's be honest, Jeffrey Simmons has had injury issues. He has had issues that he's either played through or missed games to. And now you're pairing him with Tavondre Sweat, who has issues of his own in a different way. And so when you got these two guys with issues, those two guys are probably some of the most important pieces on this defense. And
I think they're the
it's
two
a
most
second
important
round
pieces.
rookie. Yeah. And I think it's a second. I would say Snead is probably pretty close
Well,
on that same level.
but I have less questions though, other than
Right.
maybe the knee long term. But like, I kind of trust that
They
he is
got
what he is.
questions, but they are so important to this defense that
Yeah.
it's not going to help with the time that he's missing now, right? Like missing OTAs or mini camps, which I guess he was out there for all of rookie mini camp anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter. And he was out there for a few of the practices at OTAs. Missing those aren't as big of an issue as missing these and
Yeah.
what he has done in between that time, and that's for any player. It's not just this summer break is important for Tavondre Sweat. It's important for any player. We're just talking about Tavondre Sweat.
Look, all I
And
know is
this training camp is so important for Tavondre Sweat's development and impact in year one. Does not dictate what he is as a rookie or as a NFL player, but it does dictate what he can be for this team in year one.
well, and I'm doing my part because I'm going to show up in camp in shape. Like I'm down like 12 pounds. Like I'm going to be there, the best version of myself for all of you out there, so I can toss Buck around like the small child that he is. I am not like I'll show up in shape. You know what I mean? Better than I have in a long time. And so I'm ready to go. It's up to Tavondre Sweat to do the same. To do the same. All right. So what else you got? Because I got another one here. I got a couple more, but I'll let you take a turn here since I got us off.
I mean, I don't really. Is cornerback the only position on this defense that just it may be one of the best positions on this team that just like I don't really have any big questions or concerns about this cornerback room.
There's no corners written on my paper.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'd be kind of the same way. I think it then goes to, really you look at the edge rushing, and they really need to just add somebody. I mean, there are some defensive ends / edge rushers out there that may be just rotational guys. They're not guys that are going to start over Arden Key, but they are guys that can at least put Rashad Weaver down or be on the opposite side of Rashad Weaver if necessary. Like this pass rush has to come from somewhere, and it can't be Jamal Adams. Like that can't be the pass rush play.
So first of all, Michael says all the people in the chat give this video a thumbs up. I completely agree. Appreciate the support, Michael, for being very kind and nice with the words. I do appreciate it. Give everybody a thumbs up there on the YouTube page and share it on Facebook and Twitter, wherever you're watching, and on the podcast app. Here's the thing: it's not always a good strategy 2 weeks from camp to be saying, well, we need to go sign a safety, a linebacker, and a pass rusher. It's like not really a good solution to problems at this stage of the summer. So that is a concern. I didn't. So I have a bigger. I think whether it's 2 linebackers, 1 linebacker, 3 linebackers, running situations, passing situations, what is the actual rotation of linebackers look like is I think more interesting than edge, because I think edge is just like they don't have enough guys. And so I wrote down bottom of the roster battles, which in my mind is at the time was backup safety and like 3rd, 4th pass rusher. Like those sort of battles on the bottom of the safety depth chart and the outside linebacker depth chart, I think are sort of an interesting thing just to keep an eye on, because I don't think they're going to solve the pass rush problem. I mean, I guess you're right. They could go sign Carl Lawson, but I feel like they're making their bed and kind of lying in it here. They committed to Sweat, and they committed to the interior of the defensive line. They didn't commit a lot of resources and assets to linebacker, middle linebacker, or pass rusher. And they committed those resources to corner. And so they're fixing interior line and exterior coverage. And that's what they chose to prioritize in the offseason. It doesn't mean that the priorities don't change next year. I would assume that they do. But I don't know. Like, I'm sort of just like, I don't know about the edge. I know what Arden Key is. I know what Harold Landry is. I don't think Rashad Weaver's the answer. I don't think there's a younger player that's going to develop into anything. Maybe there's a body in there that develops. Harold, I think, is going to make the roster. But I think they decided a long time ago, like that we're just stuck with this until next year, and we're going to see
And
if we
it's
can make
really
it work.
weird, right? Because they talked about, in the offseason with Brian Callahan was like, well, Arden Key tells Parkarski, Arden Key is a situational pass rusher. You really need I think he even said you need 4 or 5 pass rushers. And they did nothing. They signed Jalen Harrell and they drafted Jalen
Him.
Harrell and then signed Khalid Duke in as an undrafted free agent. That was what they did after saying that they thought that Arden Key was only a situational guy. And then, I again,
If they had
I'm
kept
so confused. I think that's the best way I can describe this defense that goes from from defensive line depth to edge to safety to linebackers. Just I'm just so confused that so many players that are on the field that you just kind of yeah.
I am had they kept Danico Autry at that position where he can go inside and outside based on situations, I think I would view it differently. I would view Landry as the starter and Key as kind of more of a backup, right? Instead of oh, you're going to have to be a starter half the time. But they didn't. They didn't keep a guy that was sort of a proven commodity and a guy that worked really well in the system and all this other stuff. And maybe
he got paid a lot. So
he did.
And I get it.
He did.
But there has to be a counterpunch, right? A counter strategy. Okay, we lost to Nico Autry. I guess maybe because they lost to Nico Autry and Aziz Al-Shaair, that was all the eggs were in those baskets, and they turn around and decide, okay, cornerback and defensive line. Maybe that was their pivot, right?
Right. And
I can accept that. But there is guys out there that are better than Tommy Rush. There are guys that are out there.
No, don't you talk about
better than Elijah Molden. And I'll say Justin Simmons is probably better than Elijah Molden.
No,
maybe. But there are guys better than the depth behind these other guys. And
no one's
to me,
better than Jack Gibbons.
Yeah, at this point, well, Cedric Gray should be better than Jack Gibbons. That's where I'm at. Cedric Gray should be better than Jack Gibbons. I'm not saying that it's an alarm that he's not, starting out the gate. But at the end of the year, obviously Cedric Gray should be starting for this team. But I just think that there are guys out there that, with the money that you have at your disposal, it's like it's like on offense, they're okay, we're going to compete on offense. On defense, it's we can maybe compete with a good chunk of our schedule. But Denard Wilson's going to for a first year defensive coordinator is going to have to do a lot of heavy scheming for a lot of the pieces that we got.
Well, and I don't. So Brian says it's a process. They can only do so much, and I think that's ultimately what we're both saying is they clearly chose, based on what was available and what fell to them. They chose to invest in the offensive line. They chose to invest in corner and free agency. They invested in receiving as well. That, we saw what they invested in. We saw what their choices were. We don't have to debate their strategy. We know what it was. It wasn't middle linebacker. It wasn't pass rusher. It wasn't safety. It wasn't tight end. We just know what it was.
And we're not talking about finding starters, right? I mean, really, we're not. We're talking about finding backup pieces or depth pieces. Because Carl Lawson's a depth piece for Arden Key, more than likely, I would assume. I mean, Carl Lawson's got talent. He's no schlub, so maybe he could beat out Arden Key. But we're talking about him. We're talking about pushing down your Matt Jacksons, your Mike Browns, your Tommy Rushes, your Caleb Murphys. We're talking about pushing guys down the list.
Do you agree with that?
Then I would say that they're
Brian says they're 10 times better than last year on defense.
I think they are. But that's a very low bar, in my opinion. That defense was poo-poo last year. And the defensive coordinator was also poo-poo last year, and the defensive philosophy was poo-poo last year. So it's not hard to be. It's like saying the offensive line is 10 times better this year than it was last year on paper, which again is not hard to do.
And that's high end, and that's high end data analytics terminology. Poo-poo, that's poo-poo. It's a very scientific term.
Maybe they use scat. I just don't like the name. I just don't like the word scat. I think poo-poo has a better, good emphasis.
Scat is for deer, right? I feel like. Linebacker rotation to me, I like if you're Sweat, I'm gonna go out there on the practice field. And I'm gonna go. All right, is Tavondre Sweat here? That's the first thing I'm gonna do. And the second thing I'm going to do when they get to any team drill or 7-on-7 drill is going to be, what is the linebacker rotation?
Yeah.
Who is one, who's two, who's lined up where, and who are they? And then who's the next pair in, or who's the third guy off the bench? And I know the plan should be Cedric Gray, green dot, Kenneth Murray, go get ball. That should be the plan eventually. I don't know if they know when they're going to get to that place. And I'm not saying that that's something they have to work out right away, but you got young players and young talent, but you drafted Cedric Gray to play a lot of snaps at that position. And linebacker is one of the few positions, especially if you're playing behind Simmons and Sweat, that you should be allowed to go out and make some mistakes. Go out and play the game, learn how to play fast, learn how to trust your eyes and your instincts. And if you make some mistakes as a rookie, fine. This defense is not winning Super Bowl this year. So, but like, I feel like he should be allowed to get out there and make mistakes. So the rotation is what I am fascinated by.
That's what I've said, all off season, is that day one, Cedric Gray just needs to get all the snaps.
I don't
understand this Gibbons fascination. I understand that he's a player that can be at the right, that knows what spot he's supposed to be in, but has trouble getting there because he's slow. I understand that he's a smart guy. I understand he's a very likable guy, but Cedric Gray has more talent than Jack Gibbons. And so to me, it's a lot like Devondre Sweat. I feel like this is the year that you put the rookies out there in positions where there isn't a guy.
Yeah.
Because Cedric Gray is at a position. Because, I'm not saying put James Williams out there. I'm not saying put Jarvis Brownlee Jr. out there. I'm not even saying Jalen Harrell. But these two guys.
I forgot about Jarvis Brownlee. They're so deep at corner.
Right. Devondre Sweat and Cedric Gray need to be out there and getting the bulk of the snaps in training camp in the preseason and when the regular season starts. Those are those guys. Like, to me, the fact that that obviously Devondre Sweat's a little bit different, but the fact that Cedric Gray, I think he did have an injury at some point, if I'm not mistaken, but the fact that Cedric Gray is not immediately at the top of the rotation when healthy, and that may be true. So I can't recall. But the fact that he's not at the top of the rotation consistently is a little uneasy feeling heading into training camp. But again, we've kind of talked about, you never know what they're using those OTAs and minicamp for to figure out. Yep. We don't know what these guys are, so we're trying to figure out, are these guys worth it before we go into training camp?
It could be a positive that Cedric Gray didn't get a lot of reps. It could be a negative that Cedric Gray didn't get a lot of reps, and we don't know what happened when we weren't there. So it is interesting, and that again, that's why, to me, one of the things I'll be noting as much as possible is going to be who's out there at middle linebacker and when, and what is the pecking order, 1 through 4, 1 through 5. James Williams is a more versatile piece. You could use him in more versatile ways if you want, and I think we know that he's an elite athlete. It's whether or not you can get him in the right place and at the right time. So other than that, I was going to say third and fourth safety, third and fourth pass rusher, but you kind of already covered pass rusher, and I guess Jamal Adams is your third safety right now. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. I mean, it's not a awful thing that he is the third safety. It's just not as good as what your safety position could be. Your depth there could be.
Is there a name you like?
The kind of where I'm at.
Sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean. Is there a name you like in the defensive line? I do think we don't speak enough about Sebastian Joseph Day. I think he's going to be a decent piece next to Simmons and Sweat. I think he can bring Sweat along. I think that he's a dependable veteran piece that I think is going to be there. I don't think he's great, but I think he's nice. Is there anybody you really like and are interested in seeing from like an outside linebacker, an edge, defensive line standpoint that you actually have your eye on more than else?
I really want to see Jalen Harrell. I think Jalen Harrell has all the physical athletic tools that you could want, but he's got to be able to put it all together. I'm interested to hear more about Otis Reese. I liked what I saw from Otis Reese last year. He's kind of like a missile. It feels like what the Titans have a lot of missiles, just directionless missiles, though. No guidance system on these missiles whatsoever. So maybe Denard Wilson can install some guidance missiles or guidance systems that no one else can.
Don't they all have GPS trackers anyway? Come on,
yeah. James Williams is another guy. There's a lot of the younger guys on this team that are that were drafted this year or signed in undrafted free agency that I think are interesting to keep an eye on their development, because ultimately those guys are supposed to turn into something. Your Otis Reese, maybe he's not supposed to, but if he turns into something, that's a nice depth piece, right? That's one less spot maybe that you have to worry about later. Maybe you can then ditch the Kenneth Murray contract. Cedric Gray means that Jack Gibbons doesn't see the field, right? And then he turned into a very good 4th round pick that's starting linebacker worthy. And there's one less piece you have to worry about. Same with James Williams. His hybrid role or whatever he's going to be as a linebacker, if he develops into a nice rotational piece, that turns into something for later on down the road. Maybe not year one. Jalen Harrell, maybe not year one. These pieces that aren't really supposed to be for year one outside of Cedric Gray and Tavondre Sweat on this team, those are the guys that you need to be watching. Those are the guys I'm most interested in.
Well, and to your point, what does it hurt if you're not going to be a good team challenging for the division and you're going to be in that like 7-win range? What does it hurt to get them all as much experience as possible and find out what you have? And it doesn't mean you're going to here's the other thing. The whole like, oh, you don't want to put a player out there too early to kill their confidence. I'm like, if your confidence is killed because you have some adversity playing NFL football, then you're not a starting NFL player. Like I just mentally, you're not that guy. The other thing is Gabe Jeudy-Lolly's another one. Like Jarvis Brown, Gabe Jeudy-Lolly and Jarvis Brownlee. If those are your like 4th and 5th and 6th or 5th and 6th corners, something like that, like you're in really good shape out there, which we all know they are. But that's going to be an interesting battle. It's kind of like wide receiver. Who's number 6? Who's number 6 in the cornerback room is interesting as well because it's so much competition. But it's interesting for a different reason. It's interesting because you're excited about it, not interesting because you're terrified about it.
It's more interesting. Like, does Caleb Farley, make the team?
Yeah, that's it.
Caleb Farley or Trey Avery? Is it where does Eric Garror fit on all of this? Does one of these guys try one of these guys at safety instead? Like maybe they are going into this game plan and take the summer break and they got in there like, okay, Caleb Farley isn't really cutting it at corner from what we've seen. Maybe we shift him to safety. Or Trey Avery, he's a little slow. Maybe he could be a safety. He's a little short, but maybe he could be a safety. So like there are conversations being had that we have to understand that like what happened at mandatory minicamp and OTAs may not necessarily be what happens at training camp.
I agree. I think Farley is the most interesting candidate for safety. If you're asking me from a skill set standpoint, I think to play a high point safety role where he could cover a lot of ground, I think he'd be very interesting at safety because I don't think he's got the hips to play press coverage in the NFL. I just don't think he does. But there's a lot of players that don't have the hips to play press coverage that have great coverage skills as a high point safety. So I think Caleb Farley is interesting to me at that position. Other than that, we've got multiple votes for Eric Garror safety campaign 2024. So there we go. I think Eric Garror doesn't have a place on the team. I think he's a scout team player, if anything. So, yeah, there you go. Okay.
I don't have any thoughts on Eric Garror.
All right. So I think that's about it. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. Next week, we'll be live from Dallas, Fort Worth, of course. Dallas, Fort Worth. For SEC Media Day. So we got a lot of SEC coverage for you next week. If something big happens at the Titans, we will absolutely be all over it. But we're going to have a lot of college football stuff for you guys next week live, same time, Monday and Thursday. We'll be live from out there at SEC Media Day. So other than that, Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, football and other F words. Sign up for good local reporting on sports. That is stackingtheinbox.com for Zach and covering the Titans. And, of course, Lower Broad Hockey on Substack covering the Nashville Predators, as well as all the other great shows across the network. The Paul Karski Podcast. You got Music City Audible, The Hot Read, everything Stoney does over at Sobros. So just everybody support everybody else. That's the way we do this stuff. And we do appreciate you guys listening. So, yes, thumbs up. That is for sure. Sinkers, Kingston Group. For Zach, I am Braden. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.